Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and you guys aren't going to believe this. But today, we have another incredible episode. I know every week you're going to be like, going to tune in, and Scott's going to be like, oh, this week, it's not that great of an episode. It's a mediocre episode we've got today. But no, never. It is always an incredible episode waiting for you as you're driving home on this November 1st day, driving home from work at 5 p.m. because you're listening to the premiere just like all truly highly respected fans. So as I said, we have got a great episode today. The first thing I want to tell you guys about before I get into the show, I've got a new Revolver column that was published over the weekend about why conservatives shouldn't idolize Dave Chappelle. I've gone over those points in past episodes. So just read the article. I've got a lot of other things to talk about today. But with the Chappelle thing, I guess, one thing I want to get cleared before you guys read it. You guys got to go read it. Like and comment on it. At least if you're seeing the link from my Twitter, or if you are sharing it on Telegram if you want to. But the main thing I want to say is that conservatives are so eager to see a celebrity say anything off the reservation, that they're just treating Dave Chappelle like he's a hero, and he has this whole history of past anti-white comments, and it's just not like he makes jokes about white people. Yeah, he makes jokes about everybody. Of course, white people can take jokes, and we have to because we're the only group that it's okay to make fun of in America. But he says the underlying point of his comedy is that he doesn't have a problem with gay people or transgender people. It's that he has a problem with white people. And conservatives should rethink and reconsider whether they think that this guy is the cancel culture hill to die on. And it's not really cancel culture. But anyway, as I said before, I urge people to read it. And now I'm going to get into the rest of the episode where we've got some really breaking news over the weekend. The first topic, there's just like so many there's actually most of it today is going to be devoted to incredibly stupid stories that shows where we are now. And I think it's like two particular stories. But the first one I want to get into is over the weekend, a Southwest airline pilot made what liberals consider a terroristic threat when he had landed his plane. He said over the intercom, reportedly, allegedly, it's not necessarily clear if he said this, but he said, "Let's go, Brandon." There are conflicting reports he may have said, "Let's go, Braves." And of course, the Atlanta Braves are in the World Series right now. Looks like they're going to win it. And he's saying this comment. And if you've ever been on a Southwest airline flight, which I assume most people have, even like other airline flights, they always make these cheesy comments where it's designed to elicit a chuckle from their from the people, from flyers, the passengers. It's just like saying, "Oh, looks like a sunny day out there. Make sure you apply sunscreen." And they're like, "Whoa," it's something like that. And it's like him saying like, "Let's go, Brandon." It's like some cheesy comment. Well, unfortunately, people didn't take it as a cheesy comment. There was one insane Associated Press reporter who decided after she heard this comment, she tried to charge into the cockpit to ask the pilot questions. Just because they're a reporter, they can just charge into a locked cockpit. And amazingly, the staff did not let her into the cockpit because, people aren't allowed to do this. It's a good thing he did say this in mid-flight, or maybe the Associated Press reporter would have tried to crash the plane, in order just for journalism, for the sake of press freedom, to crash the plane. So this is like a total non-story. This is not a news story. But yes, we're talking about it on Highly Respected because it illustrates things. Because it became a major news story. If you're on Twitter, you are seeing every liberal blue check obsessively tweet about this. There is something deeply triggering and traumatizing about this. And you're seeing just such outrageous comments. And you have to remember, these aren't just random idiots. These are CNN and MSNBC commentators saying this. Like Julia or I guess that's how you pronounce her, who's a former assistant DHS secretary, was talking about how this is a terroristic threat, and it's like unbelievable that people are allowed to say this. You have Asha Ragnappa, who's former FBI lawyer and is, I believe, a Yale law professor. She's one of CNN's top legal analysts. She's always on there, and she's saying that this is equivalent to, say, praise ISIS. And people said, like, I think there's a difference between ISIS and Let's Go Brandon. But she's like, no, actually, there's not. ISIS never attacked our capital, so this is actually way worse. This is a terrorist threat, and others are just saying that like this is another person said that this is MAGA Zeke Heil. Is Let's Go Brandon, and so this is the commentary that's bubbling up, and there's these insane comments, but there's everyone demanding this this pilot's head on. They're demanding it. They're demanding that head. They're demanding it on Pike. They want him decapitated and then held up as an example for all those other pilots who may say, "Let's go, Brandon," because we will not tolerate this on our airwaves. And I mean, the one thing is like they're liberals whenever they have something like of this nature, they then pretend that we live in an apolitical world where people don't mix politics and work, and we always expect like our people who are serving us, or whether it's an airline pilot or a cashier at the grocery store, not to make any political comments. But that's not how America works now. There are several airlines that allow pilots to wear, and staff in like attendants and others to wear like Black Lives Matter pins. And liberals will just say, "Well, that's not a political comment. That's a moral comment. That's an important statement that must be made." And you also have to think is like all these teachers that liberals of TikTok and others document all the time. They're making political statements every single day to their students, and a lot of them are never disciplined. And we expect like teachers to be much more apolitical and neutral than we do airline pilots who are just making a cheesy sign-off remark. No one's opinion is going to change because their airline pilot said, "Let's go, Brandon." Like they're like, well, maybe I now secretly believe fuck Joe Biden. Now my whole politics have changed. I've been indoctrinated by my airline pilot. That's very different from 11-year-olds who are listening to their 6th grade teacher, tell them that America was built on white supremacy and gender pronouns are what's right and you can change your gender now. All that has a much bigger impact, but there's less concern for that. But so liberals in this situation want to pretend that, operating in ordinary day life is completely apolitical and neutral. And that's just not the case. That's like a total lie. Like the whole, like everything in our world is politicized. Like ads are politicized. If you even go to certain grocery stores or certain stores or other things, you'll see political statements there. Like there is very little escape from politics, but it's all on one side. You'll see a gay pride flag or a Black Lives Matter flag or some other social justice cause upheld by these corporations and companies you have to frequent and for basic services. And, you're just supposed to accept it. And you have to think of, like, how many airline pilots said Black Lives Matter over their intercom system? And there was a lot of people who were just reporting this, last year. And then, like, the whole crowd cheered. Or they would say stuff like, I think there was, like, a airline pilot who said, like, justice for Breonna Taylor or something of that nature. And, like, it all cheered. And, like, when liberals were confronted with this, like, hey, when somebody said Black Lives Matter or stuff, they're like, well, I would support that. And it is like a nature that like you shouldn't hold to these standards in all cases because I mean they obviously have double standards, so it's not like there is no neutral apolitical space anymore. And even in this regard, it's not him trying to like impose his political ideas on somebody, like saying like Black Lives Matter. It's just like he's just making an inside joke to his fellow passengers, and one insane AP reporter felt that justified her charging into the cockpit, which it's just for journalism. It's not terrorism. But as all the liberals are saying, the real terrorism was the "Let's Go Brandon" saying, is the pilot saying that, because that indicates that he could have crashed a plane somewhere or used that airplane to do some serious damage. I'm not sure where he would have used the terrorism against. Would have he gone after a mass facility? I don't know what, but they generally believe that this is like a sign that this guy was ready to do terrorism by saying "Let's go, Brandon." And this, as I said before, these are not just wackos on Twitter. These are credentialed, serious people that they allow on TV who are saying these things. And this is their mindset, that they're like saying that this isn't just a political opinion. This is terrorism. And they've been saying this about the "Let's go, Brandon" and "Fuck Joe Biden" chant for a couple weeks now. So this is just building up to this really stupid, inconsequential story about, a Southwest airline pilot saying this thing. And, I guess the next thing to go into is to discuss the "Let's Go Brandon" chant, which, like, conservatives absolutely love. I don't think I've seen them love anything more than the "Let's Go Brandon" chant. Since, like, even more than Covfefe, any more than all these like goofy things that they get into, this is like the number one thing that they absolutely love is "Let's Go Brandon." For those who don't know, I think most people who are listening to the show would probably know where "Let's Go Brandon" comes from. But anyway, it comes from some NBC reporter was interviewing a NASCAR driver whose name is Brandon after he just won a race, and the crowd was chanting "Fuck Joe Biden." And she's like here, she's like there, and she's like saying, "Oh, the crowd is chanting, 'Let's go, Brandon.'" And clearly they weren't saying "Let's go, Brandon." And it is spiraled since then into becoming this term that is used as a less vulgar way of saying "fuck Joe Biden." And it's just taken over. Republican senators are saying it and wearing shirts and hats with it. And they really absolutely love "Let's go, Brandon." There are some arguments over whether this is based or cringe. Some people are complaining that, there's so many crazy things going on in America and conservatives aren't showing enough resistance to it, that this serves as, a substitute. That instead of doing anything, they'll just say, like, "Let's go, Brandon," and then imagine that that is actually doing something. So people make that argument. Others just find it like cringe that like "Let's go, Brandon." Like, this is a BoomerCon meme. Of course it's a BoomerCon meme. And they just don't want to do it for that. And, they go along and whatever. I'm more positive about "Let's Go, Brandon" because, it does express a level of dissatisfaction with the current administration. The "Fuck Joe Biden" I felt was like pretty vulgar. I like some way about like joint vulgarity of, even though I appreciated the sentiment and stuff, but it was like a little weird, growing up, because we did have these like standards and norms, and like a whole crowd just like saying "fuck" anything like together is just like a little is odd to me, because that's like, there's like kids around and you're not supposed to say that. But there is like a serious like vulgarization of American society and decline in norms and standards, especially with like politicians all wanting to say the F word. I remember when Beto O'Rourke like made it his like a part of his campaign pledge. I think it was about guns, and he said like "fuck," and they're like, "Oh, Beto O'Rourke is so base." It's like very Reddit tiered to like for a public persona or figure to say the F word, and to say it like openly on Twitter or say it on TV. And they're like, "We're not going to censor this. This is so serious that they said fuck Trump, that we have to allow this." And people even said that we're saying like vulgarities on like CNN personalities and hosts would say the F word and other vulgarities in order to emphasize just how serious this is. And they're like, "Wow, he really went there. We just can't censor that." And, so there is like that part of it. And I always like, that rubs me the wrong way. Even though I like the sentiment, I like the enthusiasm behind it, and I like the energy behind it. And it's like a clear case of like, if a crowd is chanting that, that is like a sign that those are like good people there. So, they've been very common at football, at college football and baseball games, which is another thing vindicating my opinion that the best team sports to watch are MLB and college football, based on the fan culture around it, along with hockey. But I'm not going to go. That's too much of a digression. Just listen to the podcast where I've talked about the differences in those two sports. But these is like an indication that it's like normal white conservative leaning people good people who are out there and they're just wanting to make their feelings heard. And the fact that they can get a whole crowd to chant "fuck Joe Biden" is a sign that they're like, those are our people, and it's like good people watching this game. Or if it's like a music concert or whatever, it's like a sign good people are there. Well, let's go, Brandon. Like, it's like cheesy and whatever, and it turns it into a way where it's not vulgar and like you can have a whole crowd chant it, and it makes it much more family friendly. It's not like that, and it's like a wink and a nod, and it's also making fun of like media lies at the same time. I know it's very BoomerCon, but like not everything that is BoomerCon is inherently bad, and it's like good that there is a way to express dissatisfaction. And the fact that like sports games will erupt in this chant does show a level of popular disenchantment with the regime's policies. So people, it's not that bad. But, we should enjoy it. On the argument that it like distracts from things, or it's like people are using this as like a substitute, I don't really see that as the case. It's like what, like there is like kind of a limit to what in some ways people can do. It's like it's not like there's like a choice here. It's like you can either chant "Let's go Brandon" at a college football game, or you can tear down the regime. I mean, those are not the options here. And it does, as I keep repeating myself, it is a way of showing popular disapproval for the president. And it is a way to connect with people and so stuff. It's like a wink and a nod and be like, oh, this person's on the same side as me. I'm going to like this person. And it like connects people and joins them together. So I'm pro Let's Go Brandon. Maybe you shouldn't say it as a Southwest airline pilot, but who cares? Like, they've politicized everything in regardless. And it doesn't matter whether he said "Let's go Brandon" or "Let's go Braves" or not. This guy deserves their support. He shouldn't be punished at all. We live in this society where everyone feels free to shout Black Lives Matter or gay right, whatever gay rights thing is. Like, we have like several months of we have multiple gay pride months. I mean, they now have a gay pride month in June, and they also have a gay history month, I think, in October. I don't know. They'll probably going to have another month next year. So there's like so many things that are just so politicized and are against your values. It's like one guy just saying one thing, it making liberals go nuts is just a sign that they believe that they own the neutral space in the apolitical sphere, and anything that upsets them means that these people must be purged. And it is like a very difference between conservatives. Like, I don't think any conservatives ever if they had an airline pilot say Black Lives Matter, they would roll their eyes and realize that, first off, they probably wouldn't do anything, and second off, they would know that this is like power speaking to them. It's like every powerful entity shares that, in our society, shares that same view and believes that same message, while they all hate "Let's Go Brandon." And the fact that like the difference in discipline reflects of what appeals to power, what is power speaking to the people. And "Let's Go Brandon" is not a sign of power speaking to the people. Black Lives Matter is, and it's just something you have to nod along and accept with. Otherwise, you may get punished, as it was the case in going around last year in Washington D.C. They would make these patrons or outside restaurants. They had to raise their fists and demand Black Lives Matter, and then they would harass and intimidate those who didn't put up their fists and didn't say Black Lives Matter. And that's that's much more severe than than an airline pilot saying "Let's go Brandon." He is not going up to every passenger demanding that they say "Let's go Brandon." He's just simply saying his point of view. But with Black Lives Matter, they will, like, a mob will surround you and demand you say that and put up your fist. And people defended that behavior, by the way, but for whatever reason, they think that this is like this was Muhammad Atta about to crash the plane or something. Now, from this very minor story that should not have been a national news story or a news story at all, I think we need to take the lesson that we're not returning to normalcy anytime soon or ever again. Like, this is now how we operate as a society, and this is how our politics operate. Is that we view, opposing statements not as just mere disagreements, but as terrorism. And that there is this way that the left can speak to power that can overwhelm and dominate the discourse and set the perimeters of speech that, it makes it for a more hostile politics and society, is that when you punish people just for saying mere statements like that, it doesn't lead to a more civil society or more civil discourse where everyone's just like professionally expressing their different disagreements. No, it just increases the hostility and the vulgarity and the alienation between the two groups that occurs. And this is all that's happening. And then we just have, there are no adults here. Like, there are no adults in the room. Like, we always, like, when Trump was, running for president, when he became president, people are like, we want the adults to return. And we're now seeing, like, how the adults have clearly degenerated. Well, I mean, they've always been this way, but Trump really broke them in a way that, like, you'd see people with, like, who are well-respected Harvard law professors or people that, like, 10, 15 years before Twitter, you would have seen, oh, I've got to respect this person. This is an expert. And we've seen these people fall for every conspiracy theory, say incredibly outrageous things that a normal person with common sense could never believe, such as thinking that an airline pilot saying "Let's go, Brandon" is the prelude to a major terrorist, that pilot committing a major terrorist attack. And but this is like how the discourse works now. That it's like so bizarre and so extreme that, there is no way we can return to civility or our decency, as all these people want to claim we can. All the supposed adults clamoring for that are probably the most insane people in American politics. Like, I don't think, like, an 18-year-old schizophrenic graper is as insane as the average CNN commentator. Like, these people are constantly in hysterics, constantly showing that they suffer from mental illness, and these are the people that we should entrust as the experts. Like, not a chance. Like, these people, I would rather have the 18-year-old graper schizophrenic run my country than these experts. But unfortunately, these are the people who are in power and have influence, and that's why we have such insane policies put upon us. We really can't get back to normal when, like, now people use masks as a social identifier. Like, people will wear masks outside alone by themselves, not just out of pure virtue signaling. And, like, wearing masks at any time is uncomfortable. And wearing a mask alone as you're out for a run, I haven't seen that in maybe this much this year, where people are out. Actually, no, never mind. I've actually seen people in the gym wearing masks on as they're on a treadmill, which is just incomprehensible. But I've seen that. So actually, I'm mistaken. I have actually seen that. But I've just seen people who walk around with masks on. And this is a real commitment to ideology that you just can't overcome. And they want their kids to be masked like all the damn time, even though the risk for them is very low. And there's important parts of their being that are being developed at that time, at that young age, and that's being restricted by having a mask on all the time and seeing everyone with a mask on. It's like it's harming their ability to tell emotions and to develop as a human being. And people will wear their masks. Like, I was out running, over this weekend, and people were trick or treating, and I saw this really sad, like, pathetic sight. I saw this guy and his kids, and they're all masked up. He's like him and his two daughters, and the guy looking at him, he looked like 20 years ago he was like a Chad, like kind of an alpha guy. Looked like he wasn't even that, and he was like in his 40s. Looked in pretty decent shape for somebody in his 40s. Wasn't morbidly obese. Clearly had like a more of an athletic body back in his prime, and now he's put on a few pounds, but still like there. And he's wearing a hockey jersey. Tall guy, looks like decent looking family, and like he's dragging along his kids, and all three of them have masks on, and they're totally alone. They're not even a part of a larger trick or treating group. It's just them. And like he's dragging them along in a wagon, and he's just looking just so beaten and so just like submissive to the order. And I assumed that the only reason he was doing this is because his wife like demanded it, and he's like, "Yes, honey," and he's dragging the kids along with masks outside, not around many people, not even just like putting on the mask to go to a door, which it's still I wouldn't do, but I mean that's more understandable. Like they're walking around masked up like everyone is outside. And you're just thinking about how like insane our society is that people are like this. Now, I would assume that this guy, he's not a full on committed person. He's literally just doing it because I would assume he's just doing it because his wife is henpecked him into doing this, and his wife is insane about that. I've talked to a lot of people, and even like people with like with fairly conservative families, and their wife was pretty conservative before COVID. When it comes to kids, they are like demand masks all the time. They even want their kids vaxxed. Like they have many suburban white moms have lost their minds over COVID, which is what it is. But you know, this is not a normal society. Just like walking around and seeing like 6-year-olds masked up as they're trick or treating, like, and their whole like family is masked up too, and they're outside, and you're just like in a like regular neighborhood, and you're just like, what the hell is going on? Like, what is this country? Like, there is just like this lie that we just like, people are just getting back to normal. And people are getting back to normal in an extent. Like, people are really going nuts over sports stadiums, which is why people are returning to the NFL, even though they shouldn't. They're just really happy about the breaded circuses coming back. People are really excited for concerts again. They're like, I'm finally getting be able to do all this normie stuff that I wasn't able to do last year. And so people are really excited about this, but at the same time, there's just these abnormal things that are going to be around with us for a long time. And this does shape how our society interacts and how our political situation is. I mean, I cannot stress how bizarre it is that elementary school kids are now masked pretty much every moment of their lives outside of their own, like, bedroom. But depending on how like insane their parents are, they may make them wear a mask at all times in the house. So, you're just thinking like, this is not a normal society. Like there's something that has permanently gone wrong, not just with like Trump derangement, but also just like the lockdowns and COVID and everything that happened last year, and also the Black Lives Matter insanity. All these things have done tremendous damage to the national psyche. And this is going to last for at least most of the decade. I don't think this is going to dissipate by 2024. Maybe by the presidential election after that, it may have been gone. Like people, like 6-year-olds are no longer masked at school. Hopefully we'll see that, but this is going to stick around for us up until at least the next presidential election. And that is, there is no return to normalcy. There is no return to civility. Like, we live in an insane country, and people need to accept that and not pine for the good old days of the 1980s when Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan worked together, or whatever, like the things that people like to jerk off to. No, like, this is like our society now, and people need to be aware of that. And that's why we have this insane event of people thinking that a Southwest Airlines pilot made a terrorist threat by making a corny joke about "Let's go, Brandon." That's the world we live in, and that's also how they demonize conservative speech. Is that all conservative speech is now terrorism? Because whenever you say that's insane, they'll just bring up January 6th, and they'll claim January 6th is worse than 9/11. As Asha Ragnappa was claiming too in her defense of the thing, is like, well, they never, the terrorists never breached our capital, but the MAGA terrorists did, the Al-Qaeda did. And it's like, that's our world that we live in. And I think all of our listeners understand that, but I think conservatives and centrists and intellectual dark web people and those who voted for Biden because they wanted to return to normalcy need to learn that quick. So the next insane story, or this is more humorous and not as insane. I mean, both of them are funny in their own respect. But this comes from the Virginia governor's race. And last week, Glenn Youngkin had a rally in Charlottesville, which is apparently a rarity because they all know that it's well, first off, it was not a Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, but people don't campaign there because it's so blue. There's like, what's the point of campaigning in Charlottesville? So it was like pretty unique that he went to Charlottesville. Well, outside his bus, there were 5 people dressed as Charlottesville Unite the Right People, but they messed it up. Like it's supposed to be white polo slacks, but they wore white button-up shirts and slacks, and they also had tiki torches and they had sunglasses on. And when this was first seen, they're like, wow, this is insane. It's like white supremacists are openly campaigning for Youngkin. And many journalists intentionally believe that willfully believe that these were actual white supremacists coming out to campaign for former Carlyle Group executive Glenn Youngkin, who is so moderate and middle of the road that it's unclear why white supremacists would do that. And if anyone has ever paid attention to what many of the Cville participants are up to since then, they are extremely anti-Trump, extremely so they would of course be anti-Youngkin and GOP. And why would they show up in tiki torches in their outfit? Like, no one has worn that in 4 years, regardless. But they just said this is a serious thing. Like, white supremacists just decided to stand by the bus to show their white supremacist support for Youngkin, and so a lot of liberals would believe this. This once again, like blue checks and others who should know better, like Rex Chapman, who is this former basketball player. I don't know really what he got. He was like a drug addict who then like became a broadcaster, and now he's just like a professional tweeter. Well, I guess I'm like a professional tweeter, but my tweets are at least good, and I'm smart. And Rex Chapman was like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe that they're doing this. He like believed this, and he's got hundreds of thousands of followers who are also believing it. And also the Terry McAuliffe's campaign and other Democratic officials were just saying, this shows the white supremacist support. So this was initially treated as serious. I think most of our listeners know what happened, but, for those who don't, I'm giving the storyline. And they went along with this and this, like, immediately. But when this first broke, they're like, this is clearly a Democrat operation. Republicans are like, this is clearly that. And then they looked at the people and it was like, first off, one of them's a woman. And then, that's a little odd. And then there's another one is a black guy. And you're like, wait a minute, what? Now, there's some liberals, I think, who are defending it. None of the blue check marks are like, this is a black white supremacist. They keep saying this about the Proud Boys and others, that there's like a multiracial white supremacy movement afoot. And so they're pointing this out, and then you're looking at it, and they're like, they could have done a better psyop with at least 5 white guys. Instead, they couldn't even do that. And this is like, why are they standing there with tiki? And it's like in the rain. Like, why do they have their tiki torches? Like, this, like, any person with common sense would realize that this is like clearly a Democrat stunt. And so over time, they began identifying this. And then, like, the McAuliffe campaign sent out a statement saying, like, we had no role in this and we condemn white supremacy. And, we would never make light of this situation. And eventually, the Lincoln Project announced, hey, we're behind this, and we're going to keep doing this to remind people of Charlottesville. Even though it was like a total PR disaster for them, it, still didn't work. It still didn't work. And you have to wonder, what was the purpose behind this? And Lincoln Project's trying to say that we're trying to humiliate and try to show that he stands with Charlottesville, that it's like just a political stunt. But that's not really what happened. They really believe when they did this that they could portray the Youngkin campaign as one and the same with Charlottesville, and that actual white nationalists dressed up in attire they haven't worn in 4 years decided just to show up one day and stand next to a Youngkin bus for no reason at all in the rain to indicate that they support him. And that was the initial purpose was to smear the Youngkin campaign. It was to attack them and say that, like, and hope that media outlets, like 5 white supremacists, one of whom is black, don't ask us about that, announced their support for Youngkin. That was the purpose of it. It wasn't just to be like cute or humorous. It was to actually create a direct tie between Youngkin and Charlottesville that doesn't exist. And they are so cynical, and they have such a low opinion of journalists, that the Democratic Party and these operatives, that they believed that they would follow along with this. And they were going to follow along with this because the local, I think there was a local Charlottesville outlet that genuinely portrayed this as like white supremacists show up at Youngkin rally to announce their support. And, they didn't use any common sense at all. People are just like that stupid. And it's not just like journalists, it's that liberals wanted to believe this. And they're willing to believe this. And it's just the same as thinking that Let's Go Brandon is a terrorist threat. They'll also believe this, that, 5 people who took a time machine from 2017 stopped by Youngkin rally to show their support for him in the pouring rain. So you were supposed to believe that these were actual Youngkin supporters. That was the intended purpose. It wasn't to protest or even to be known as that this was like a stunt. If you look at what McAuliffe's staff and Virginia Democrats tweeted about it, which they likely knew about this, and even the person who had set this up, Lauren Windsor, who I actually met like a long time ago on an RT set, she's like, not, like the really very homely, I guess you want to say, when she does these like she's trying to be like the James O'Keefe of the left. She tweeted out like, wow, I can't believe that the GOP would tweet this. So she tweeted surprised at this, and then she's like, oh yeah, I was behind this. And so were all these McCall staff. They're like, this must be condemned by Youngkin for having these white supremacist supporters. So it was intended to they expected the media to never investigate and to, they'll have their fact checkers is like, actually fact check, Charlottesville attendees did endorse Youngkin and were at his campaign rally. This is how the media works, and they were that cynical. But the fact that there was a black guy involved, and even like ordinary journalists, are like, this is too ridiculous for us to believe. And I guess that is like somewhat white pilling or optimistic that even they thought this was too far. But that's just how little regard Democrats have for the media. And it's like Biden lies to them all the time. They say like inflation doesn't exist. There's no labor shortage. There's no supply chain problem. Like people are just having to wait longer on their treadmill. And the media slops it up and repeats it. And then they'll have their fact checkers. Whenever conservatives doubt that, they'll like fact check. Oh, this is a false claim. Biden said otherwise. We're going to believe Biden. So they believe that anything that Democrats do and they repeat often enough is just true. And then that's how truth, in quotation marks, is established in our society. And so we could have very well seen this situation play out. If it wasn't for social media, they would have gotten away with this idea that 5 white supremacists, including 1 black white supremacist, came out to awkwardly stand around a Youngkin bus. And this indicated that white supremacists had endorsed Youngkin. And so that's how it was playing out. But this whole campaign, Charlottesville was like 4 years ago, and I agree with this point that Current American Citizen always says that, like, the only people who think that Charlottesville was important are Wignats is like this world historical event. It was important in how it shaped, American political discourse, at least for that time. But the only people who view it as a world historical event are Wignats who participated in it and like leftists and like Joe Biden. Joe Biden campaigned on like Charlottesville, but then for some reason all these Charlottesville participants then eagerly supported his campaign. Why that is, I don't know, but they did, and they thought it was a smart political move. As we've seen now, that was not a smart political move. They've become more irrelevant in the post-Trump era than before. But Charlottesville still lives on because all McAuliffe is campaigning on is tying Youngkin to Trump and to Charlottesville. That's his whole campaign. There is nothing else he's campaigning on. And he's just like, I'm bringing back jobs. It's like boring, but his main pitch is Youngkin is the Charlottesville Trump white supremacist candidate. That is all he's talking about. And Charlottesville, still lives on someone within Virginia. It does have a major impact. I think that Charlottesville is the reason that Northam beat Ed Gillespie so badly in 2017. That was The 2017 race was nearly 2 months after Charlottesville. It occurred in early November, and Charlottesville was in August 12th, 2017. And so it occurred, not too far after. Still very much fresh in Virginians' minds. And Northam really did, try to paint Gillespie as the Charlottesville candidate. There was an ad where this guy in a pickup truck with like Confederate flags, hunts down non-white children, and people were like, "This is so ridiculous. This can't help Northam." Well, it did, because he won by 10 points, and that was just, I don't think people expected him. People did not expect him to win by that much. And in this race, it's too early, and people have been wanting me to talk about the race, the Virginia race, for a long time. I'm going to talk about it a little bit here, but I'm going to talk about it at length in the IQ supplement this week, because I really want to see how it plays out before I make assumptions about it. I mean, but we can see this is a very close race. It's going to be within 5 points, like whatever happens. I mean, if it's over 5 points, that's something weird's happening. But it's with either Youngkin or McAuliffe. It is a toss-up right now. Polls show that Youngkin has a slight lead in the polls, but you have to remember that early voting's been happening since, I believe, September. So, this is, it may not be as competitive a race as we think when it comes to the final results, but it is like way more of a competitive race than it should be. And Republicans are smartly campaigning on this. And all Democrats can do is just appeal to what they think that, like, these centrists and liberals were upset about in the Trump era with both Charlottesville and Trump. And that's the only thing that they can campaign about on Youngkin. And that's why they're pulling these stunts as well. I mean, in like every ad is about Trump and Charlottesville. It's like Charlottesville happened. It was like, a few hundred people like demonstrating. I mean, these things have happened throughout American history. It wasn't that important. There were scuffles. Of course, there were scuffles because two opposing sides met up. But the idea that this was, world historic event for like 1,000, I guess white nationalism is the best. White nationalist alt-right people showed up at this place, was indicative of anything larger scale is just nonsense. And I think that was like a thing that even people at the time in the alt-right didn't understand, is that they really thought that, they were about to take over the country. And when they had this mass rally, and you have to remember is that these 1,000 people were not, people in the area. Like, people traveled from all over the country and even all over the world to get there. Like, I guarantee you that no more than half of those people lived within driving distance of Charlottesville. So it was not necessarily a local demonstration. It was like a national protest of bringing people there. But if that's all they could, hope to bring out in real life, that was a sign that, this is not a movement on the verge of taking over anything. And what happened was it's like a massive backlash for Charlottesville that it still lingers on, to the extent where the now president used that as the launching pad for his campaign. When he announced he was going to run in 2019, he had centered it around Charlottesville. As like, this is so terrible that I need to run on this. And now it is so toxic and so outrageous to in people's minds due to a lot of media brainwashing, is that people will still campaign on it and try to tar their opponents as being affiliated with Charlottesville. And that's going to continue for a while. I don't know when it's going to dissipate. I mean, it's like, you think that like January 6th would weigh more in the minds. And also, McAuliffe's also campaigning on January 6th as well. But it still like hits. And, that's something, there's something to be said about that. And it doesn't hit because this was representative of a national uprising or anything. I just think that, the people who marched, I think that, like, if you've listened to any of the IQ supplements that I've done with Nightmare Vision, where we went over the history of the alt-right, it really did show how those leaders really misjudged the moment and what people were willing to go for. And I don't think it's like a six. They were supposed to show like this PR thing, like we're real and we're in the real world and we're something that a lot of people can rally behind. And now it's just so detested and hated. Not necessarily for the fall of the organ. I mean, besides their lack of foresight in seeing this, but they still remain like this detestable scapegoat or boogeyman in American politics, and no one ever wants to really defend them anymore. I mean, even when Trump's, they retconned like Trump's comments about very fine people. They're like, he was only referring to this like normal like statue preservation group that didn't even show up to Charlottesville. He was not referring to the Nazis or anything. I mean, he was like clearly referring to the people who actually marched there. And now conservatives just retcon that. And there's like nobody really wants to defend Charlottesville in the public sphere. I guess like a lot of these as going on. I mean, there's a massive Charlottesville civil lawsuit ongoing right now, which it's not getting as much attention as you would think. I mean, even though BuzzFeed and HuffPost, it's really just the outlets that still have Antifa reporters on their payroll that are following along with it. But it doesn't seem like it's reaching the general discussion. I don't know if I don't think cable news is really covering it that much. And, the my timeline doesn't even seem to be discussing it that much, even though it is, it's a fairly important cases that they're building around. It's like they're effectively suing people for hosting a demonstration, but the fact that a lot of these carrot guys are not the most sympathetic defendants, and that some of these guys made like outlandish and over the top statements beforehand, it makes it easier for the plaintiffs to have a case. But I mean, it's still a stupid lawsuit that they're filing against them. And even with that in mind, it's like nobody wants to even like bother defending these guys or like going to their defense. And some of the way is making yourself so toxic that you're now used as like the devil in campaigns. Like nobody even wants to be associated with you, not even just like on a political campaign perspective, but even like a commentary perspective, because there's no like mainstream voices who are talking about like the Charlottesville case and like noting like its harmfulness. I mean, like me, like here, I mean, I'm not mainstream, that mainstream, but like even here, it's like, you're not seeing people like generally care about, and like even if you compare this to January 6th, there's people like Glenn Greenwald and Michael Tracy, Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson's doing a whole week special on January 6th, and it's trying to portray it in a light that that's more sympathetic to the protesters. Literally, no one wants to do that for Charlottesville, and that does show like how if you toxify yourself and you alienate yourself so much from the political mainstream, you come to this perspective where it's like, something's clearly being done wrong to you, such as a civil lawsuit, but no one wants to rush to your defense because they view you as like these people who marginalized themselves and put them off in a ghetto and made themselves fall into the stereotype that the media wanted them to portray them as. And now they're left with, this very devastating lawsuit. But it doesn't necessarily matter that if like a mainstream voice defended them, because like the court case in of itself is going to go in a different manner regardless of whether Glenn Greenwald comes to their aid. But that's a little bit, I mean, I guess that's a long digression on the nature of Charlottesville standing in our society. But yeah, it is remarkable how long Charlottesville stayed within the psyche. And as I say, and I agree with current American citizen, like things like Charlottesville have happened many, many times in history. People have gathered for demonstrate. All types of extremists or alleged extremists have come together. Having a rally with like a few hundred people or so is not like a sign of anything really other than them like gathering together. But both like the liberals use it as a cudgel, and it was effective in 2017. I don't think it's going to be as effective in 2021 because most people, 4 years is a long time for most people's time horizon, and they do have short-term memory, and clearly they can't they're trying desperately to tie Youngkin to it, and it's just not going to work. I mean, Youngkin is just he's too respectable in a way. He's too middle class. He was not involved with that. I mean, he was head of the Carlo group when that occurred. So it's just not going to work this time, in my opinion. So we'll have to see what happens in Virginia. I think it's a very interesting race. It's getting so close due to how terrible Biden's policies are. Just to give a brief analysis before I give a longer one on the IQ supplement this week on it, it's such a close race for two reasons. One, Biden's policies are proving so disastrous that people are wanting to register their dissent and dissatisfaction. This always happens in off-year elections when the opposing party usually sweeps through Congress. And it even goes down to gubernatorial races. And I think and McAuliffe is deeply tied with Biden. He's having Biden and Kamala out on the campaign trail with him. Kamala, once again, showing her trademark charisma. She's trying to make jokes on the campaign trail using different accents, and she's getting no applause or no response from the crowd at all. People aren't just that excited about Biden and Kamala. I mean, they even had to roll out Obama for this. And there's even ads running as like, everything you love is on the ballot. Rather having a good education, being anti-racist. These all are on the ballot, so make sure to vote. He's giving these ads about it. And it's like, they imagine the right to education is somehow on the ballot. It's like, the Democrats are eliminating your education in Virginia. It's not like they're going to eliminate education. I think Mr. Grove had a good tweet the other day. It's like, well, the Youngkin agenda, according to McAuliffe, is like, bring back slavery. That's everything that you would imagine that he would do if he comes into power. And now all their campaign is they're complaining about this book Beloved, which is, I doubt any school child has ever enjoyed reading this book, but they're trying to ban books. It's like, there's no more censorious side than the modern day liberals, modern day Democratic Party, and yet they're running with this. So it's just all stupid. I don't think they're on the back foot when it comes to, the trying to defend Democratic policies, and they're trying to go to these cultural issues of banning Beloved and banning and bringing back Charlottesville. I guess every day would be Charlottesville under Youngkin and Trump, and they're trying to tie him to that. And it's like, yeah, if he gets governor, he's going to make Trump president of Virginia. And they always say that it's like Trump's first stop on his campaign to win re-election is in Virginia. We have to stop that. And I don't really think that's the case. I mean, Youngkin is almost a quasi rebuke to Trump because he's not running on a Trumpian agenda. He's trying as much as possible to distance himself from Trump, and he can't. Trump can't campaign for him, and he's very moderate. He's not really a Trump Republican, and this would almost the arguments of what it means for 2024 are too hard to discern at this moment. It's good. It's a good sign for 2022, but I'll get onto that for the IQ supplement. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. But on the second reason that Youngkin is doing well is the education issue. Democrats are doing so horribly on this in the state of Virginia, with McAuliffe saying, parents have no right to determine their kids' education, that they should have no control over that. It should be left to the school boards and these experts, the teachers, and as we all see from TikToks, teachers are idiots, and as we should know from personal experience. That's all he's wanting to put it in charge of the experts. The experts who are these idiots who want to teach critical race theory are the only ones who should have any say over education. They're also trying to eliminate merit-based admissions. They're trying to, they're also having issues over everyone having to stay masked. And that's upsetting some liberal and centrist parents, even though, as you can see, some people just want to wear masks all the time. So those people are not at fault here. So the education issue, regardless of the people who like to be slaves, masked 24/7, it is a potent issue, and there are just, I mean, Fairfax County, not especially Loudoun County and Fairfax County to a lesser extent, both big counties in Northern Virginia have had massive fights over the school board and education, and they do feel like Youngkin's on their side, while McAuliffe is on the side of the out-of-touch school boards and teachers who want to treat them like peasants and serfs. So there it is with one thing that Youngkin rather is doing very well on. So those two issues, regardless of what happens on Tuesday, Biden's in a lot of trouble, and I don't think it's going to get better for Biden going into 2022 with these midterms. I think the midterms are going to be a disaster for Biden. And of course, there's the chances that funny things will happen and maybe they'll pull off races that they shouldn't have won for other reasons. But I think looking at it for right now, it's going to be very good for Republicans in the midterms because all these problems that Biden has, they're going to get worse. Inflation's going to get worse. The border crisis is going to get worse. Crime's going to get worse. And education's going to get worse. These educational issues. And also people are just getting fed up with COVID and the lockdowns and the mandates. They want this to end. And Biden is not promising an end. He campaigned on promising to end COVID and return us to normal. And we've only grown more bizarre and abnormal in the meantime. So I don't think Biden, things are just going to get worse. And if the fact that Republicans can pull off a victory in what people have now seen as not even a battleground state, but as a reliably blue state, that does signal very bad things for Biden, and the Democrats. But we will talk about this more on this week's IQ supplement, which will discuss the election results. So wait for that. I'm gonna try to hold off on all these great takes. The last thing I want to discuss before I get into the IQs are cognitive elite question. I need to take some more IQ supplements so I can remember what my favorite group of people are. Anyway, the last thing I want to talk about before I get into the cognitive elite question today is to address what may be the most insane thing Biden has done so far. He has given reparations to illegal aliens for the offense of enforcing immigration law. Last week it was announced, or not announced, but reported that the Biden administration is in negotiations with the ACLU and other liberal lawyers to reach a settlement with illegal aliens who suffered under family separation, which is basic immigration enforcement. I mean, they merely put adults and kids in separate facilities, and many of the adults are human smugglers or human traffickers who are not actually their parents, who are just using them as a shield to get into the country, or they're just random people who are just saying they're claiming a child so they can have an easier access to stay in the country. So there are many reasons why this. Anyway, they had family separation, and it was a deterrent, and it was working, and then they decided to condemn it, but the Biden administration has now said, nope, this is terrible. I mean, Trump had ended it in 2018, so this hadn't even been in effect for about 3 years. But now Biden is going to give nearly $500,000 to each individual illegal who claims they were victimized by this policy. Now let's think about how insane this is. These are lawbreakers who broke our law, and we enforced what was the law on the books. But now, since we view the law on the books as racist and evil, we can now pay tons and tons of money to the illegal lawbreakers who are not citizens in this country, just for enforcing basic immigration law. This creates a horrible precedent that we could use for any victim or alleged victim. Of course, this is in quotation marks. I'm not doing quote unquote victim, who claims that the basic enforcement of immigration law affected them, and now they can claim some type of reparation. So think about this. For people who suffered under the travel ban, maybe they could get some compensation. And even in this reconciliation bill that they're trying to sneak in amnesty through, but the Senate parliamentarian keeps striking them down. If you guys don't know, there's two different bills. There's an infrastructure bill, and then there's a budget reconciliation bill they're trying to get through. And they're trying to put all these immigration provisions in the budget reconciliation bill. And the budget reconciliation bill, due to claiming that it only pertains to the budget, doesn't require a filibuster-proof majority to pass. It only requires a simple majority to pass. And they're trying to put amnesty in there, but in order to be open to this process, they have to have the Senate parliamentarian to rule on it. And the Senate parliamentarian has continued to say, no, you can't do this. So they keep trying to do different ideas with this bill. And they're trying to do amnesty in it. But there's other immigration provisions in there where they're trying to capture over 200,000 unused green cards from years past and give them to legal immigrants, not necessarily illegal immigrants. And one of the categories of people are those who were denied entry to this country under the travel ban that they're now going to give green cards to. So that's like a form of reparations, you have to think. And then there is so there's other people who you could see, like people who suffer from remain in Mexico, that like they weren't allowed, they're a supposed asylum seeker, they had to wait in Mexico. Now they can say, I deserve damages too, and the Biden administration may agree with them. Maybe anyone who's been arrested at an area that ICE is no longer allowed to operate in because they're now putting new restrictions on ICE on where they can enforce the law. Maybe those people could say, oh, I was a rapist and a murderer, but they arrested me near a church. This is outrageous. And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll pay you. So this is the new precedent we're having. This is just showing how like more insane and how more outrageous this Biden administration is. And then Biden did the complete opposite of returning us to normalcy. We've been instead returned to an even more bizarre situation where things like reparations for illegals, a thing we would have never thought possible before, is now government policy. And that's the nature of these things. I mean, hopefully there are ways to challenge the reparations in court or some other mechanism. I'm hoping for that, but we'll have to keep an eye on it, and I'll dedicate more time to this. I need to have just a solely immigration-focused episode. I'll try to do that soon, because there's just a lot to talk about, so I don't want to dwell too much on that with this episode, because I've been bouncing around with this. But I will get to that soon enough, where we just talk about everything going on with immigration and with the Biden administration and their various policies that they want to do. But with that, I'm now going to turn to the cognitive elite question. As a reminder, you too can get the option to ask me questions or suggest guests and topics if you sign up for the cognitive elite option at Highly Respected Substack at highlyrespected.substack.com. And you should sign up for the Substack anyway. But now to the question. This one comes from Dave. He asks, Scott, what do you think that Biden will run again in 2024? You know what? Barring a health emergency that completely incapacitates him, or that he really can't walk around anymore, or he can't talk, I think he's going to run again in 2024. Democrats are screwed if they run him again and they have to run Kamala or one of his other cabinet appointees. Like, if they run Kamala, Trump could be banned from everything. Like, he could not be running commercials. He couldn't be on Facebook. He couldn't be on Twitter. Like, they would have like a complete blackout on Trump. Trump could still win against Kamala. Kamala is one of the most unlikable politicians there has ever been. Like, if you ever watch her on these stump speeches, they are so bad. And the media realizes she has the opposite of charisma. She is just so unlikable that no one would ever vote for her. And she's just so obviously two-faced. And there's nothing that she can point to as a success. She's even bungling her own portfolio as vice president. And like, how do you bungle your portfolio as a vice president? You are like, you're not supposed to do anything, but she's able to manage to screw that up. So the Democratic machine realizes that Kamala would not be good. But then it becomes a problem if they want like somebody else to run. Now, the only other person who could win, and this is terrifying, is Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom the Republicans should worry about Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is extremely charismatic. He's a Chad. Like, I gotta say this. Like, I hate his policies, but he is a Chad. Whenever he's in an interview and they try to get at him, he destroys interviewers. He would do that on a presidential campaign. He is just like, and that's what Democratic voters want. We always think that they want a woman of color who really expresses them and they're like can fetishize over, like, no, they really want like Giga Chad, good looking white guy who's woke that's in part why they like Biden, but Biden is also like nearly 80, so it doesn't really fully work out. But now you're going to get a younger version of that with a guy that white awfuls like definitely dream over, like Gavin Newsom. And this guy cannot be like shamed or get lost in an interview. If you ever try to watch a combative interview with him, he destroys the reporter. I feel very sorry for like there are not like even he gives Trump a run for his money on how to handle reporters. And in some ways he's much better because Trump is like Trump and he just does things. Trump makes it a lot funnier, but like Newsom is like being younger, he's much sharper and he's like a less ridiculous person than Trump. He's very good at handling that. He's a very good public speaker. And I think and the way he was able to secure a victory in the roll call should indicate to people that this guy can win a national election. I mean, he won that by a lopsided margin. It was like, why did they even have a recall in the first place? But Newsom and Kamala share the same political machine. They both come from California. They both have the same allies. They both come up from the same sphere. And the Democratic Party really wants to avoid a messy primary fight going into 2024. They'd much rather just have Biden there. They save them the trouble. Like they just run Biden. But I think with the outside the options, it really is, unless they can figure out a way to make Gavin Newsom as the candidate without much of a fight, they're like screwed. And they do not want to make Kamala as their candidate. They know she would lose to whoever the Republicans decide to run. And it's just going to be bad news. So I think that Biden will run again in 2024. He may not realize he's running, but he will be running. But a lot can change. He is, as I said, he's getting close to 80. He's clearly showing signs of significant mental decline and other health problems. And when you're that age, you can have just like a snap health problem happen to you, even if you're really healthy, and that could in your ability to operate in public. So maybe that could happen. Lot could change. Or is poll numbers are so terrible that they're like, we can't run you again. You're with let's go. Everyone was saying, let's go, Brandon. You're going to have to be retired. We're going to get Gavin Newsom. And I think if it's not Gavin Newsom, I think that besides Biden, they don't have, or rather, if I would say this, outside of Gavin Newsom, the Democrats don't have anyone else really to run behind him, or run if he doesn't run. They don't have a deep bench of talent. They showed that in the 2020 primary. Even Bernie Sanders is going to be too old. He's not going to run again, and they don't want him. And if you looked at that rest of that field, none of those people, Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg would probably do worse than Kamala. They do not have a deep field to call upon of charismatic, young talent to just run for national office besides Gavin Newsom. So, I would say, and it's probably going to be a good thing if Biden runs, because if he doesn't run, there's a high likelihood Newsom runs in. He would likely win, and we would have full-on libtard dictatorship under Newsom, and that would not be very good. So those are my final thoughts for today. Keep an eye out for the IQ supplement I'm going to do on the Virginia governor's race later this week. So until next time, stay respected.